And obviously, I disagree strongly with how they're treating the migrants in the facility. At the same time, a lot of them are illegal aliens who are consensually here illegally.
Stop! We've addressed this point. We have addressed this point. I don't stop bringing up that same point as if it hasn't been addressed. I want to make sure I'm not mischaracterizing you. Did you say that you care more about the policy of deregulating the economy than economic metrics?
Absolutely.
Why the fuck would you want to deregulate the economy if it's not for the economic metrics?
So, in terms of deregulating the economy,
quite frankly, you need to subscribe to Rinnycast.
Dude, Rinnycast. Physics, look, you got really lucky with majoring in graphic design, because if you were majoring in any of the sciences, physics is just impossible, bro. Okay.
I didn't get lucky. What's up?
You did. You did.
So what's bad about Trump?
There's a lot bad about Trump. The fact that his policy is really bad, the fact that he is super divisive, the fact that a lot of the stuff that he's been doing is illegal. He holds kind of a disdain for the fundamental values of the country.
Like what specifically, though?
Are there any of those things that I just said that sparkle particularly with you, or do you want me to just choose one randomly?
Just anything works.
I need you to level with me. Are you just going to say the N-word as soon as I say this?
No.
Okay. Are you sure?
Yeah.
Why would he tell you the truth?
No, I'm just wondering. Maybe like an approach of honesty. Maybe like an approach of honesty would be good for with these guys. Well, you're like kind of talking in a very reserved way that only people who come up here and scream the N-word do.
No, it's because I'm tired.
Well, I'm glad you're not going to scream the N-word. Screaming the N-word is bad. So let's talk about the fact that Donald Trump doesn't value democracy, right? I think that's a reason that we probably shouldn't have elected him into a democratically held office. Would you agree with that? If I can substantiate that he's anti-democracy, that we shouldn't have elected him into a democratic office?
Well, he's Republican, so he shouldn't, like...
He is?
Yeah, like... I don't really understand what you said.
Do you think that if somebody's anti-democracy, we should elect them into a democratic office?
No.
Or as in like a democratically elected office, somebody who's anti-democracy probably shouldn't be in a democratically elected office, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So if Donald Trump tried to overthrow our democracy in 2020, that probably means that we shouldn't have put him back into a democratically elected office, right?
Yeah, I guess.
Okay. So when Donald Trump was pressuring the vice president to unilaterally throw out electoral college votes, don't you think that was kind of like an attack on democracy?
Yeah.
Okay. And he did that, right?
Yeah.
So probably shouldn't have elected him back, right?
Yeah, I guess.
Based. All right. Love you. I knew it, bro. I knew it, bro. I knew it.
Bro. Oh my God.
I saw somebody in the comments say, don't you think Russiagate was an attack on democracy? Absolutely not. And I sent you an invite. We can have a conversation about it if you want to.
I was actually the one who was right, because he lied to you. Like I said he would.
I knew he was going to lie to me. I just thought that maybe I would be able to fish it out.
Okay.
Load in.
oh,
you're
hi,
loaded.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Hi, Sarah.
Hi. I know it says debate me. I'm curious if it's totally fine if you're not. I'm curious if you're open to just a discussion instead of really a debate.
Yeah, so when I say debate me, I mean like if you disagree with the prompt that I have up, it doesn't need to be like super aggressive or anything. It's just,
Yeah, okay. So I guess I wanted, I guess, some clarity about where you guys are coming from, because I'll just say, like, I leaned pretty Democrat up until very recently, and I was just kind of up in the air. I'm a registered libertarian. I did
Mhm.
vote for Trump this time around.
Mhm.
I don't agree with all his policies. I was just like, I think this guy is closer to my vision for America. So I was curious what your vision is for America. Like, if you could have, the system that you wanted, would you say it would be closer to a pure democracy than what we have right now? Do you think there should be limits to democracy?
Yeah. So, like in my ideal system, I think that there would probably be less centralized power into one person. I think that having, breaking up the executive power into multiple things kind of gives an incentive or an incentive away from like centralization into one person. I'm incredibly skeptical of like any sort of tyrannical, dictatorial kind of systems. Right now, it seems like Donald Trump is
Oh,
centralizing a lot of power into one person, into himself, and I think that that's something that is super, super spooky. I think that the electoral college is probably not necessary anymore. I don't think that we have really a need for the electoral college. I think that there are obviously some bars that need to be set like in front of democracy. So, like for example, we probably shouldn't be allowed to use our democratic voice to get rid of democracy. That's probably not something that anybody who's pro democracy would support. Right. So, like that's why in the 14th Amendment we prevent insurrectionists from holding office. I think that's common sense. I think that makes sense to me. Um, but yeah, right now I think that there just needs to be way more safeguards in front of like centralization of singularly held power.
I see. I think that makes a lot of sense, and I think basically, I obviously agree with you. I'm libertarian leaning. I don't love the executive having a lot of authority. There are things that he's done that I don't like. I
Mm-hmm.
think that oftentimes libertarians might go towards either party depending on which powers they're more nervous about, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, for example, I was kind of like on the fence for a while because I support not completely deregulating the economy. I think maybe a few regulations are important, but
Mm-hmm.
there are just, I guess one example of why I started leaning more red versus blue is especially after I moved to California and I started having to work I wanted to work in the healthcare industry, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Democrats often support so many red tape things. And
Mm-hmm.
I know that some regulations that Trump is cutting on, across a lot of different sectors of the economy, that it might be, better to maybe replace certain regulations that are more difficult to comply with ones that are easier to comply with, but still give consumers information and everything.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just like, I don't know, because I know as both a consumer of healthcare and as and a provider,
Mm-hmm.
it's just, so many bureaucratic rules and just jumping down our throats. And I really hate that. That's probably my least favorite thing about the Democrat Party versus Republicans. They still have like a lot of red tape things, but it's less so. It's less so. And that's one of Trump's big things is trying to eliminate a lot of those rules.
Sure.
Um, and then you could ask me about like certain things about like which specific rules I do or don't support. But basically, my overall stance is that a lot of the times it's like there's a really expensive regulation they have on the books that could be replaced with a much cheaper one that's just about informing consumers about any risks or about your credentials and everything versus
Sure.
like mandating you have to meet this and that requirement. It's like thousands of things.
Sure. I mean, like in terms of what particular regulations apply to your specific workplace, like I'm not going to be able to super like strictly engage with that. The main thing that I would say is that I think the deregulating attitude is more appropriate for some sectors than other sectors, right? Like I've heard very convincing arguments for further deregulation of like housing, right? Because there's a lot of red tape
Yes.
in front of housing. It makes it really
Yeah,
hard to build new
absolutely.
housing, especially considering like the giant population growth. There's probably going to be more people entering the housing market. You need more housing to keep up with it. So like that's something that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense to me is deregulating like the housing market, for example. if I was guessing, my intuition would tell me that the right and left are probably almost equally for deregulating, or at least like overhauling a lot of the systems in terms of healthcare. I don't think almost either of the political parties are satisfied with how our healthcare operates right now. I think the biggest problem, though, is that like the Conservative Party right now takes such a like all or nothing approach with like almost all of their policies, to where like, while I think there are realistic conversations that we can, and people on the left are having these conversations, right? That's kind of the whole point of Abundance book by Ezra Klein. The abundance, right? That's the whole point, is like, deregulating so we can kind of produce a lot more. The problem is that like conservatives will say, oh yeah, we need to deregulate. People think they're talking about housing, and then they remove like the endangerment finding from the EPA, which is like fucking insane. I think that's the biggest problem.
Yeah, I mean, I think, if you talk about nonpartisan leaning, official libertarians, because it's generally based on individual rights, there's usually, unless someone's kind of propagandized to just support oil and gas no matter what, they would support some kind of regulation, or at least some kind of method to ensure that you don't have like just non-witting, like non-participating actors that are going to be victims of your like what you're doing. So that's the case with the environmental stuff, is that completely unrelated actors that are not involved in the transaction are like going to have things that they don't consent to, like the rising ocean stuff. I mean, I live kind of close to the coast, so I understand that for sure.
Sure. I guess one of my biggest questions, because if I'm being frank, I don't want to lie to you, the idea of like a libertarian seeing Trump as the better option is like it like short circuits my brain. So like for this specific thing, for this specific thing, like I acknowledge that you're saying that like, regulations generally like muck up the economy for no good reason. Like if that's the case, if that's your belief, how is it the case that you could support somebody who is like, their main policy platform was like putting in a bunch of tariffs?
So the tariff situation, I don't love that either, but he also supported a ton of deregulation. That's one of the big things that he actually brags about, is cutting a lot of regulations. And then in terms of the tariffs, I was kind of hoping, maybe if this could replace some of the income taxes or something. But as like a low income libertarian, I'm still a student. I'm doing like delivery drivings until I'm allowed to practice, my actual field in healthcare. Like they I'm sorry, I'm really frustrated with all the rules in front of me. It's gotten me into a lot in debt, and I just really want to help people.
I understand that. I'm just like, if the problem is,
in terms of,
go ahead.
In terms of the tariffs, like that's one individual policy. I'm more so worried about regulations than I am about taxes, because you can kind of dodge a lot of the effects of tariffs. Not with everything. I know there are like knock-on effects of the economy with a lot of different tariffs, but it's just like, that is like one form of taxation. I think that he might have lowered other forms of taxation, but like that's not really, like, tax policy for a lot of libertarians isn't their main priority. It's deregulation.
So I guess
it really just depends what you're looking at.
What's your argument against the regulations though? Because my guess is that like a libertarian is going to argue against all these regulations because of like the market interference, right?
No, I mean, you're going to have a lot of people who have different views on why they're a libertarian. So I think that market interference is one problem with it, but I would put it honestly pretty far down the list of the things, like in terms of the tariffs. Yeah, they definitely have market interference. Not a policy that I would have enacted. But, I would say that it's not as important to me as just eliminating most existing laws, rules, and regulations on the books that get in the way of...
But why?
Oh, because I think that basically my vision for America is I want a situation where if you want to start a business, if you want to provide a service, if you want to sell a good, that it's very easy and straightforward to start a business and be an entrepreneur and provide healthcare to the poor. I mean, that's actually something I'm very passionate about. but it's something that is really difficult to get into, and it's super expensive, and the government kind of has to cover a lot of it, but then it's imperfect in how it does it.
Sure.
But it's because of how many things they put in the way of making it possible. Like, I don't know, like in my workplace, it's pretty much unanimous agreement that like things are overregulated. When the county auditors come in, they sometimes even make up regulations that don't exist, and it's just exhausting.
I mean, that's almost certainly true, but I mean, like I said, so okay, I guess here's a more, I think this cuts more at the heart of our disagreement. Do you think that like you agree that when you're voting for the president, you should probably be voting for like some sort of harm reduction, right? Like you're never going to find your perfect candidate, so you vote for the one that is closest to your ideal and the one that is like the better of the two scenarios, right?
Yes, and actually with this recent election, I was actually paying very close attention because I was on the fence up until pretty late, and I was one of the few people who was like on the fence up until like not that long before the election, because I think most people kind of knew how they felt. But I was paying very close attention to what Trump decided to say about abortion, because I'm pretty moderate on abortion, but it's more important to me that abortion stay legal early on. And I live in a pretty safe state for that right now. But I was trying to see how harsh Trump was going to be on abortion, and it sounded like he moderated on it a little bit. I know he kind of flip-flopped, but like because he had that little wiggle room where he was like, I'm not going to ban abortion pills or whatever. I think he said that at some point, like not federally. And I was like, okay, that makes me lean over to the Republican side, you know?
Sure, yeah, and that makes sense. I think like the actual degree to which the president has an influence over abortion legislation was overstated by both sides, to be clear. Like I'm not even certain that either of them could have really done much about it, considering the nature of the Supreme Court case. But like the reason I asked that question is because it seems to me that both sides are in support of some sort of regulation or some sort of like regulation cuts. I'm like 99% sure, I don't have the specific quote on hand, that Kamala Harris was talking about like cutting red tape in terms of housing specifically. So I guess the problem is that it seems like the only sectors that, were aiming for deregulation that weren't shared in common between the two candidates are the ones that we probably wouldn't want deregulated, right? It seems like the only one that Trump was actually promoting on deregulating that Kamala Harris wasn't was like oil and gas.
Well, no, I mean, I would say that he also wants to remove a lot of barriers when it comes to education and healthcare, and
sure, he does.
I mean, he obviously wants more enforcement of regulations when it comes to immigration, which my views on immigration are pretty complicated as a libertarian, but it's
so that's I'm not saying that he doesn't do that. I'm saying that you only vote for Donald Trump for what's unique about Donald Trump, right? So if there's something that was like a deal breaker for you from Donald Trump, I'm assuming that it's unique to him, right? So in terms of like deregulating housing or deregulating like healthcare or whatever, seems like a lot of this was generally supported by the Democrats and by Kamala Harris as well. So I'm wondering, like, what is the unique part to Trump here?
I would need to see information on that in terms of the Democrats being as supportive of deregulation as Republicans on things like healthcare and housing. And like the housing one is important, but I don't know, when I've looked into like things that people are like, oh yeah, this is like a cool thing that like a lot of abundance people are happy with the housing. And then I look into the actual page that they're showing, it's like they're doing a really tiny amount of deregulation and then also pumping in a bunch of redistribution and a lot of like perverse incentive programs. I mean, that's also another thing I'm very passionate about, is a lot of the ways that welfare works they provide a lot of perverse incentives. And as somebody who works with up until very recently providing healthcare for the poor and for those who use have substance abuse problems who are on the streets a lot, I see how the perverse incentives impact their actual decision making. So like we have this thing called the homeless industrial complex, and it's like, okay, so they're wasting a bunch of taxpayer money to provide programs for people that incentivize them to like commit crimes, basically.
Sure, and there's conversations that we can have about that. I guess my problem is that like these kind of conversations that we're having right now, I think like pretty meaningfully sane wash what the Republicans are right now. Like I truly do wish that politics was a like an in-depth conversation about like what kind of incentives the welfare state leaves with certain people, or like how best to administer welfare. The problem is that like when those conversations are happening between a candidate who, I mean, realistically, a lot of the policies seem pretty fucking popular, right? Like deregulating housing, like the negotiations with the healthcare companies to lower prescription prices. Like that seems like that's something that Biden and Harris got initiated. Like all these things from Harris, and then when we look at Donald Trump, all of like the best policies are just ones that he shares in common with Kamala Harris, and all of the worst policies are like genuine, like fundamental attacks on like the institutions of our country. I don't see like the cost benefit analysis here. I don't understand how I could ever veer towards somebody like Donald Trump, right? Like the fact that we have him like wildly expanding the funding for ICE. These kind of mass deportations aren't going to be good for the economy by any measure, nor are they going to be good for like the stability of our country in general. We have like him literally calling for the death of sitting Congress people, which is really fucking crazy. We have him like filling up his cabinet full of white nationalists. Like this is like
white nationalists.
Yes, white nationalists.
I don't know, because if you look at the actual numbers on his immigration policy, and this is something where I guess like a lot of the controversy is from, maybe the ICE deportations. I know those are a lot more controversial than deportations that take place like at the border, like customs or
turnarounds or whatever. Yeah.
But like if you ignore the difference between ICE and those, like he's been like the vast majority of people that have come into the country and been naturalized under Trump are not white. I mean, I've noticed that a lot of the Democrats, and this is probably why a lot of Democrats lost recently, I don't know if it actually even had anything to do with Kamala. The definition of white nationalist, I think, is very questionable. It just suddenly became like, if you don't want like zero deportations, or you don't want to completely
I'm using this in a very straightforward way, right? Like the fact that he nominated Jeremy Carl to the State Department after saying that like we're going through a great replacement, and saying that he'd rather be a black person in the Jim Crow era than a white person in DC, or like being buddy with Laura Loomer, who literally said that she's pro-white nationalism. I'm not using this as like a talking point. I'm saying Donald Trump is genuinely surrounding himself with a bunch of white nationalists. Stephen Miller is literally the one doing the immigration policy. I'm not like throwing terms around or misusing the term. I'm saying that these are, in some cases, self-avowed white nationalists.
I have heard
and
about
Laura
her.
Loomer and Laura Loomer said that Donald Trump offered her a fucking position as the press secretary.
From what I've heard about Laura Loomer, I don't know a ton about her, but I have heard that she seems to have changed her views about white nationalism. I think that she did used to like support it or whatever, but like
I've never seen an indication that she's walked back on what she said about white nationalism, especially considering like during the 2024 election
she said she opposed the hate towards brown people and stuff like that.
Well, white nationalists will never come out and say I hate brown people, right? Even white nationalists will never say I hate brown people. They'll say that I actually love brown people, I want them to have their own state.
I mean, in terms of like these people that you're saying are white nationalists, I mean, I guess I should maybe research it a little bit more, but in terms of the actual policy of the Trump administration, it's not remotely white nationalist. I mean, if you look at the percentage of people who've been coming in,
it at least is moving in a direction of like reducing legal immigration, right? The goal of the Trump administration is to reduce migration.
I mean, it depends what you're looking at. I think that he was very pro H-1B and stuff. I don't know if they're as pro H-1B as the Democrats are, but I'd actually say that, my views on immigration are complicated, but given the pathways that we have right now, I would also prefer reducing immigration. I don't think that makes me a white nationalist. I mean, it doesn't make you a white nationalist, but everything that the Trump administration is doing right now, I would expect a white nationalist administration to do, other than supporting H-1Bs. I would completely disagree with you, to be honest. And, basically, if you look at the numbers, like for example, of like the amount of people that he has naturalized as citizens, and of the amount of people that he's let into the country, and even the amounts of people that he's deported, a lot of them align with like earlier people, like for example, like the Clinton administration, and like the Obama administration also deported a lot of people. I think it was just less heavy on the ice.
I'm not saying, well, necessarily if you're turning people around, you're not going to have that crazy numbers in terms of like demographics because you're doing turnarounds. You're not specifically looking for people. But I'm not saying right now that Donald Trump is like specifically searching out for non-white people to deport or specifically tailoring for white people to let in. That's not even the claim that I'm making. I'm saying that his immigration policymakers are white nationalists, and he filled his cabinet full of a lot of white nationalists, and his immigration policy isn't good, and it's more likely than not to violate tons of people's constitutional rights, and it's just by no metric any sort of positive. Like I don't even see a single positive that we would gain from like mass deportations over just like a simple amnesty program like we saw under Reagan.
Well, even Reagan, like the numbers of immigration were lower overall, so he may have deported fewer people than Trump as well. I think if you go back really far, I mean, it was just, I don't know how much of a difference there even was partisan-wise as far as that kind of thing. But I was just thinking about, you know, the overall numbers have been going up for immigration for a while. But if you see why the country kind of flipped back in terms of having the Republican not only win, you know, the electoral college, but also the popular vote, which was not very typical. It's because if you look at Biden's policy, he was actually the one who was more out of line with like the typical policy for Democrats or Republicans for the numbers that he was letting in. I think he let in like 9 or 10 million people. I mean, I don't know. No. I think that might be combined legally or illegally.
No, what you're citing is an encounter number, and it was super skewed by Title 42. That's what you're citing. The problem is that right now I'm not even necessarily commenting on like the popularity of these policies. I'm saying these aren't good. Mass deportations are not a good policy. This isn't a good thing that the Trump administration is doing right now.
I mean, I would prefer if they, you know, enforce immigration using other measures, but I would prefer mass deportations to no enforcement, you know?
We don't, it's not the case that we have mass deportations or no enforcement, right? Like, I'm failing to see, like, let's compare the amnesty program that the Reagan administration went through compared to,
which I kind of disagree with Reagan's policy there, but
well, I'm saying let's compare the two, right? Let's compare the effects from Reagan's amnesty program to the current effects right now of mass deportations, or like the projected effects that are, because right now technically we're not even seeing mass deportations. Donald Trump isn't very good at it, but like a dream world mass deportation policy. There's no world where I don't even know if in any regard mass deportations are going to be better than an amnesty program.
I think there are some analyses that have problems with them where people are trying to say like, oh, their non-immigration like crime rate is really low. I think that there are some issues with those analyses, but I agree with Democrats actually that most of them don't commit crimes unrelated to immigration. But if you're a Republican, or if you have any sort of libertarian values, or like any sort of pro-deregulation thing, if you look at the values of the people who are coming in, they're pulling the country pretty hard to the left. Like if you
think that's true.
It's absolutely true. I mean, immigrants and in terms of both first and second generation immigrants, I'm pretty sure that they both very much lean Democrat.
Yeah, I mean, if one policy platform is targeted immigrants almost necessarily, yeah, they're going to be in support of the other party. But like generally, like Hispanic culture, which is where like 90% of this immigration is coming from, like Hispanic culture is not in any way like irreconcilable or against conservative values. I'm pretty sure that Hispanics went pretty disproportionately toward Trump this past election, right? And like
in terms of, well, they had to change the Republican Party platform to start appealing to more people who came into, either, most Latinos, I guess, are first, second generation, maybe third, but like, because I don't want to assume that all Latinos are immigrants or whatever. I'm trying to be careful with that, but it's just,
so we're talking about like the culture of it, right? So you said that like it seems like immigrants are the people that are coming in are like against conservative or libertarian values, but it just doesn't seem like that's the case. It seems like that's only the case insofar as conservatives are against immigration, so immigrants are naturally going to be against immigration or against the conservatives.
No, I disagree with that, because you can ask them like. Sometimes there's data that breaks it down by first or second generation immigrants. Sometimes it's data that breaks down by ethnicity, which, you do kind of have to determine it sometimes that way of like, because like a lot of the people who are from certain ethnic groups are either first or second generation here. That's just statistically the case. And you can ask them questions about things like free speech, things about deregulation, things about quite a few questions about the economy, about like how involved should the government be involved in the economy. And, like you can just see that they don't usually agree with libertarian values or with free speech as much as people who have been here longer typically. And like, so it's just not really the case that they agree with at least politically conservative values. In terms of a lot of conservative values, in terms of like gender roles and stuff, I actually agree with you.
I actually fully reject that the conservatives are in any way pro freedom of speech. I reject that. But on top of that, like, forgive me, I feel like it's an incredibly poor argument to say that we need mass deportations because in general immigrant populations are against deregulation when like
that's are we
seriously saying that we want to curb immigration? Are we seriously saying that we want to like curb immigration on the grounds that they're not pro deregulation, even though it's going to be like by all accounts like terrible for the economy?
In the immediate sense, yeah, I could see there being a lot of negative economic effects. But in terms of the values of the country, that's what a lot of people are more concerned about rather than what the immediate economic effects are.
If you think that, you're just wrong. Like the idea that people are more concerned about if somebody is pro deregulation than the status of the economy, that's just not true at all.
Because you keep appealing to the status of the economy, but you're looking in like an immediate sense rather than the long-term freedom of the country.
No. Long-term economic, like there's no world where, an immigration moratorium is going to positively affect the economy in the long term. Right? This isn't just short-term economic downfall. This is like economic downfall in general. You're losing productivity. You're losing a workforce.
No.
You're losing demand.
So in terms of the immediate sense, yes, but you have to think in the long term about.
No, I'm talking about in the long term.
Are you going to let me finish? Sorry.
Well, I just want to make sure that you're characterizing what I said correctly.
So it's not just because you have to think about not just are there more productive people in the economy right now, and like more consumers, more producers in the economy. It's also what are the policies long term of the economy and how is that going to affect everyone? So like if we were to take it, I know that this is not actually what's happening, but like I'm just trying to give you an extreme example so that you could sort of see where I'm coming from, because this is like the actual effect is like a small percentage of this, but I'm saying like an extreme example is imagine if tomorrow you open the border to 1 billion communists and it's like immediately they can't vote. They might be a boon to the economy like immediately, but then, you wait, 20, 30 years as they get the right to vote, as their kids get the right to vote. And then that could long-term destroy the economy and quality of life for everyone. Does that make sense?
Yes, but do you understand the reason that you're drawing that analogy is because a giant flood of communist immigrants coming in and affecting the policy of the United States is going to make the United States a communist country, which is going to be worst in terms of generating capital. Whereas
yes, that's my point.
You bringing in people who are who are anti-deregulation, that's not going to have the same effect.
Like deregulation is generally good for economic growth. I mean, obviously, some regulations have different.
do you have any indication that your plan of deregulating is going to be better for the economy than immigration has for the United States?
I mean, in terms of studies, not any off the top of my head, but in terms of the absolute economic effects that you're appealing to a lot, I actually value those less than I value the policies themselves. But you know, I maybe I could try to see if there are studies that analyze the differences, but it's kind of hard to model exactly what the policies are going to be until they actually happen. You just kind of have directional data about, you know, generally what are the sentiments of these different groups. Like, you don't know what the exact policy will be until they actually vote for it. I want to make sure I'm not mischaracterizing you. Did you say that you care more about the policy of deregulating the economy than economic metrics? Absolutely.
Why the fuck would you want to deregulate the economy if it's not for the economic metrics?
So, in terms of deregulating the economy, it's mainly about freedom rather than the economic metrics. Now, it happens that in a lot of cases, deregulation does help economic growth. But in terms of the metrics themselves, they are not nearly as important to me as just the freedom to be able to do things in the economy, you know?
So you're valuing the freedom to operate within the economy. Then
obviously I would oppose it, but you know, in terms of any small differences.
Okay, I'm starting to see the libertarian in you come out, because I just don't understand why.
I'm sorry,
like, this is just incredibly unintuitive. The idea that, so like, let's say that we could take, we would get a 30% increased GDP, but we lose 1% of our economic freedom. Do you think that that would be justifiable? Do you think you would do that? I can't hear you talk when you're outside of the app, by the way. Just want to let you know. She said her phone was dying. I believe it. Hypothetically speaking, yeah, we're engaging with. Oh, she left.
Her phone probably died.
Oh, rip. Good timing though, because starting to unravel. Like,
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. The idea that we say we want to deregulate the economy, even if it makes the economy less efficient, because we maximize freedom. Like, in furtherance of what? I think Sarah is back.
Yeah, go ahead. Good luck.
Love you, buddy.
You can let me down anytime. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Very good, very good.
He's a cool guy. I like that guy.
Hi. Yeah,
Real
I'm
ass
so
dude.
sorry. My phone was dying.
It's okay, it happens. By the way, let me just let me commend you. Let me commend you. Some real ass shit showing back up, by the way. Okay, I do appreciate that. I appreciate that. Okay, there you go. Real ass shit.
Yeah, it's hard to find the live in TikTok, so I couldn't even find it in my history. I had to like go to the search bar and then be like Trump debate. Hopefully, I can find this because there are a bunch of them. But yeah. So I think the last thing that you asked me that I heard was something about, would I be willing to sacrifice some GDP growth if it meant deregulation, which is an interesting trade-off.
Sure.
I think because usually that's not how it would work, but
so right as soon as you left,
element.
right as soon as you left, I think the hypothetical that I gave was that, would you support, like, let's say that there was a policy that you could pass that would reduce you know, economic freedom or like you know, freedom to open a firm by like 1%, but you gain like 30 times GDP or 30% GDP. Would you do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think so, and I think it also matters to what position we're already in economically. Like if I were in a different country where I would have to like worry more about economic growth just to fund enough military spending to defend ourselves from America or whatever other power, the economic growth would matter more to me than the deregulation. But because we're such like a super dominant military thing, you know, but I would still be willing to like make like a concession like that if it's like a tiny regulation that increases GDP by that much. But you know,
Sure.
it would have to be
I'm glad you answered that
like
way,
really proven.
to be fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
because like if you a lot of regulation is kind of death by 1,000 cuts. Like if you look at
sure.
like Trump's record is overwhelmingly deregulatory versus the Biden administration added like tons in terms of cumulative regulatory costs. Like so it's just kind of a net policy. I mean, I obviously agree with some environmental regulations. You don't want external victims who are not part of that transaction, you know.
So the thing that I was trying to isolate there for is that it's kind of seemed like what you were saying is that like economic freedom is more important than economic stability. I kind of reject that. I think that ultimately it's getting kind of philosophical, but I'm going to try and avoid it as much as possible. The thing that I want to achieve via governing is making the people's lives as good as possible, right? I want to make people as happy as possible. And I think the best way to do so is through like a democratic system. And there obviously needs to be some regulation on the markets, and you don't disagree with that, I don't think. So the thing that I'm getting at, right, is that I think naturally the majority of people are going to be more happy with the continued flow of legal immigration because it's just better for the economy. I don't see any reason to justify this idea that the regulation cuts that Donald Trump is going to provide over Kamala Harris is going to, in any regard, outweigh like the amount of benefit that something like I don't even know if it's justified to me that it's going to outweigh the negative that we get from mass deportations, let alone the positive that we would get from some sort of amnesty program.
Yeah, I mean, I think I could see people having different values in this regard, but I think maybe where you might not be able to model a lot of like maybe center right people, like I did a poll on this actually in a server that was pretty, I'd say it was overall center right leaning. And I said, which one do you value more to the extent to which they're at odds, which I think usually they're not, but to the extent to which they are at odds. Is it freedom or economic growth? And they overwhelmingly preferred freedom to economic growth. So like if there were a policy that somehow like enslaved everyone's brains to where, you know, they had to be super productive, it's like, I don't think that would be worthwhile, especially because we're already super dominant and as an economy in the world. We have like, you know,
I wouldn't support that either because I don't think that would make the people's lives happy. I think the only reason that we value economic growth is because it generally lifts the living conditions of the people higher in a country that is more economically, boisterous or, in a country that promotes more growth. I just see. So I guess the thing that I'm getting at is like, why do you think that, but in terms of like deportations, right? Why do you think that the mass deportations are going to make people's lives better or make people happier than that sort of amnesty program?
Because of the growth of the administrative state tends to be more supported by the populations that are coming into the country. I don't want to judge every individual. My ideal policy would be to let in a bunch of libertarians, but just factually speaking, like most of the people coming in are pulling the country in the opposite direction, and really the electoral college only counterbalances that like partially.
But like, is your end goal just to have libertarians with political power? Because like my impression is that it certainly can't be the case that you want to engage like in something super, like, let's say that the harms genuinely were that mass deportations require, a secret police force that is going to go through and violate the constitutional rights of civilians in order to determine who is illegal and who's not. And then these kind of deportations are going to be super brutal because we need to keep them in like very, like low quality holding facilities because we just don't have the infrastructure to reasonably account for all of these people. And we get them out in a fairly brutal way and we send them to countries that have like super subpar living conditions. let's say all of that happens, but we get like a 1% increase in libertarian voters. Is that like a worthy trade-off to you?
I mean, 1% increase, I mean, it depends on what you mean by the 1%. Like 1% growth as compared to the whatever 3% of the country it is now. I don't exactly know what the percentage is. Like, do you mean taking it from like 3 to 4%? Let's say it's 3% right now. I don't actually know if that's a figure. Do you mean going from 3 to 4% or like 3% to 3.03%?
I mean, 3 to 4%.
Honestly, that would be like, if that were the only option other than amnesty, I would still support it, but obviously I support other mechanisms if that's possible.
That's crazy. Like, I just don't understand how you can substantiate the idea that that's going to be better for the country.
Increasing, basically, you're asking me about increasing the power of the Libertarian Party by like a third, because they're, you know, it's already, I mean, I think it would be a lot more than what you're insinuating here, but the Libertarian Party is pretty small as it is. We only really have leverage by trying to put pressure on the existing political parties. And frankly, I think that the vast majority of regulations and regulatory burden should just be off the books. And if you're inviting in millions and millions of people every single generation who have more regulatory values on average, you know, it's not everybody.
Like, I'm understanding that you're saying that, you know, these immigrant populations are generally less pro deregulation, so reducing immigration is going to cause it. Like, I understand like directly that that's the benefit that you're looking for. I'm at, like, the thing that I'm asking you is like, what is it about the increase or like the deregulation that makes that such like a fundamental principle that you're pushing for over like the prevention of suffering of like millions of people? I just don't like that. Do you understand how that's like incredibly unintuitive?
So for me, in my opinion, I think that the regulation causes a lot of suffering, and I think that it's beyond just any specific economic metric. That it, like I said, I mean, if there are even any like economic studies that are projecting like exactly how how regulatory the country will become because of immigration, I mean, it's almost impossible to precisely model that, because you don't exactly know how politics is going to evolve. I mean, it's changed even in the last like 10, 15 years quite dramatically, and you don't really know exactly what policies are going to be on the table, especially like 30 plus years down the line. But, you know, I want to have kids and I want to make sure that they live in a free country too. If you were to
quantify this, like, how do you think that right now, let's say Trump engaging in the deportation efforts in the way that he is for his entirety of his 4 years, do you think that the amount of suffering that causes is like above or like greater than, less than, or equal to the amount of suffering caused, like the kind of suffering caused by the regulation that you were explaining to me at the beginning of the conversation?
I think that the amount of suffering caused by the regulation in the long run is greater. I know that you probably disagree with that. I think that the deportations,
that's like mind-boggling to me.
I think the deportations for the most part are basically an immediate sort of like, it will cause some people some negative emotions and maybe some negative situations that honestly most illegal immigrants are here consensually. I know some people were trafficked, some people were brought here as kids. It wasn't really their choice. I support like exceptions, obviously, to mass deportations, just, you know, trying to be humane, especially to the people who didn't really choose to come here on their own, but they still just happened to not be legally here because of no fault of their own. But frankly, like, in terms of the people who broke the laws either to get here or they overstayed their visa, I don't have the most sympathy. Like, they already broke the law. They kind of knew what they were doing.
I mean, first of all, we understand. So there's two problems with that. The first one is that we understand that typically the punishment for coming here illegally is not like, you know, being deported to a country in which you have a withholding order from, or like being deported to, you know, to fucking El Salvador, where you have an agreement with the president, you get lumped in with a bunch of like fucking narco terrorists and tortured in a mega prison, right? Like that's not the typical procedure that we put detainees through. So the idea that these are like consenting people who come in here illegally and know that they're going to face this kind of this route of deportation. It's just
Well,
not the case. Like, this has been a particularly cruel like administration against immigrants.
In terms of the ones where they're being put in those larger prisons, for the most part, as far as I understand it, those are mostly people who are either charged with or convicted of other criminal offenses. In terms of the policy for people who are here illegally, the Trump administration basically offered them, you know, not only travel fees to go back to their own country, but even the opportunity to reapply to come back here. So like, I don't,
for certain subsects, yeah, sure. But the problem is that, like, what you're saying right now, like, oh, well, the people that were being held in the mega prison had a criminal record. Like that's not even true, right? Like, I think it was, I think it was like somewhere around 40% of the people that were deported to CCOT had no identifiable criminal record. Was it upward of that?
That means it's not the majority that don't, you know, that don't have any. I don't, by criminal record, I'm not sure if they're just referring.
That's surely not saying that these are the people that are, you know, have a criminal history, right? Like,
some of them may not be. In terms of criminal record, I'm not sure if they're referring to just convictions or charges too. But yeah, that's what I'm saying, is that the majority are people who had additional crimes if they're being put in that kind of facility. I mean, I obviously disagree with, you know, like, obviously I think that somebody should just be deported in general, and, like, you know, we should monitor the border better. And then ideally the methods would instead be cutting government benefits, because there are states that give government benefits to illegal immigrants. And then also we would have like E-Verify and stuff.
I was wrong. My bad. It wasn't 40%. It was 75% of the men on the list that was deported to CCOT had no identifiable criminal record in the United States or abroad. I've had 75%. My bad.
For CCOT, and then what is the CCOT thing again?
CCOT was the prison in El Salvador that the Trump administration was deporting people to, where they literally every single person who got asked after release said that they got tortured in it.
Yeah, I mean, that is really unfortunate. I don't know how much that is down to what Trump did directly versus what El Salvador did. Well,
we had an agreement to send them to CCOT, right? It was never a secret that these people would be tortured in CCOT. So yeah. I can demonstrate.
I might have heard of like the 40% thing before, and then so I don't, because the 75% figure is something that sounds new to me. I'd only seen like individual cases that were exceptions before for the criminal thing.
So I can demonstrate to you like grievous suffering that is happening at the hands of these mass deportation efforts. Like, what's the grievous suffering that we're facing due to regulation?
In terms of the grievous suffering, well, firstly, it's suffering inflicted on people who did not enter the country illegally or overstay a visa illegally. Like I said, I mean,
why does that afford people special? Like, it was never the understanding that these people who come in here illegally are going to be sent to be tortured, right? So this is not like a consensual agreement.
I obviously disagree with that. I think there are.
Well, I'm saying this is not a consensual agreement, right? These are not people who signed up for this, right? This was an exception, right?
Well, so you
downplaying you. Not even in some cases. Some of these people were asylum seekers. I would encourage you to not comment on this thing because you clearly don't know what you're talking about. Like, I'm not saying this in a disrespectful way. I just wouldn't comment on this situation and try and downplay it, considering how severe this kind of thing is.
I
mean, I'm asking you, like, without downplaying this situation, what's the suffering that's being caused by these?
So
by these regulation lifts?
In terms of the suffering to individual people, it's pretty much any citizen that wants to start a business, it's much more difficult to do so, and they have to take on often a ton of debt to do so, and they often can't follow their dreams because it's just completely unaffordable. And so it's harder to like pin down any like specific point of, if there are like people being tortured. It sounds like there are people being tortured in those prisons who came to the country illegally or overstayed a visa or something. I guess
some of them, but some of them are also asylum seekers
and then they were legally here and they didn't commit a crime.
Some of them were asylum seekers. 75% had no identifiable criminal record. They were sent to be tortured in a foreign prison. And I'm sorry.
Asylum seekers, they were here legally or illegally?
Asylum seekers have temporary protected status.
Okay, so he was sending legal immigrants to this prison?
Certain people with protected status.
Let me look this up.
Okay. So my my problem is, right, like, first of all, this standard is unevenly applied. I'm almost certain you know this, right? Because it's almost certainly the case as well that if somebody wants to get into some sort of manufacturing profession, the tariffs are absolutely fucking them right now, right? So like the idea that your condemnation for the tariffs were like, oh yeah, I think those were inadvisable, but your condemnation for regulation is saying that this is robbing people of their livelihoods, right? Like, one, this is an unevenly applied standard, and then the second thing is that this idea that even if we were to take the C class alone, this idea that regulation is imposing the amount of suffering that these people went through is laughable. It's just absurd.
Well, in terms of the amount of victims, I don't know how many people were sent to this CCOT thing that were actually innocent or whatever. I just kind of have to trust the figure you're giving me right now because I have not heard that before. There are like a limited number of them versus I'm kind of looking at the long-term future of the country. Do I want things to just grow more and more into this extreme like administrative behemoth? So like if you're trying to do a utilitarian calculation, you have to look at the number of people who are being affected, and this is like sort of
so let's look at the amount of people affected. So let's look at the normalization by the Trump administration of, on the grounds of mass deportations of, you know, secret police force members breaking into people's private property without a judicial warrant, right? Just using administrative warrants. Wouldn't that be something that you would want to prevent? Don't you think that that's probably going to impose suffering on the people?
I'm not a legal expert on why it's administrative versus criminal. I don't really know that the standards for each of those. I obviously, like I've said several times, I mean, I don't support the mechanisms that they're using. You know,
well, we're talking about your justification for voting for Donald Trump right now. So when I'm asking you to defend mass deportations, I'm asking you in some sense to defend why Donald Trump is a better situation, or like a better president, considering the kind of policies that he has than Kamala Harris. That's what I'm asking you to substantiate right now. You said that you voted for Donald Trump because of his deregulatory policy, but I'm asking you to I'm asking you to compare that, if we're agreeing that the point of government is to reduce the suffering and make people happy. I'm asking you to compare that to how in any regard is it making people more happy to deregulate than it is to prevent, like, in some cases, or like in 75% of cases, innocent people from being tortured or citizens from having their homes broken into by a secret police force.
Citizens, like, how many citizens and how many people were sent to this camp that didn't have any criminal record?
I think it was 75% of the 300-ish people we sent to this prison.
Yeah, 300. Honestly, a few hundred people, like, yeah, I mean, I'm just trusting your 75% and 300 people number. But in terms of 300 people versus over 300 million people and all their descendants, I'm sorry, but yeah, the deregulation is a lot more important.
Okay. Do you understand?
And all their descendants.
Do you understand that the amount of suffering that is incurred by being tortured is probably greater than the amount of suffering incurred by having to deal with regulatory issues?
Well, yeah, but that's
okay. That's good.
That's you saying 1-to-1. Firstly, like I said, I don't really view it the
1-to-1.
as...
I just want to make sure that we agree on that first, right? So let's look at the burden that you put on people trying to get into manufacturing due to the tariffs. Do you agree that that's probably going to prevent people from wanting to go into manufacturing right now?
Yeah, I'm sure that it makes it a little bit harder. I do think that tariffs are a little bit different than a lot of regulations in that...
I'm sorry. Like, do we understand how dishonest we're being with this language? Like, when you're talking about deregulation, you're saying like, oh, people aren't going to be able to go through with, you know, fulfilling their lives, their dreams, their American dreams. And when we're talking about the tariffs, you say, oh yeah, it might make it a little bit harder. Do you understand like the dishonest framing that you're engaging in right now?
No. Are you gonna let me like talk? Because I'm worried. Like, sure. I'm afraid that I'll like try to say something, you're gonna interrupt me. But so the reason that I was framing it that way is because I was going to elaborate on that. So one of the reasons that it's a little bit different than a lot of regulations is that the tariffs are often like they're often like a percentage of what you're doing when you're getting like of what you're selling or buying when you're getting into that industry versus like a lot of regulations are upfront costs. So if you like, I obviously disagree with both, but a regulation where it's like you can't sell this kind of healthcare unless you take on, you know, tens of like 10 plus years of school and all of this stuff, and you go into a ton of debt and you have to do this and that, and then you have to do if you want to open your own facility, it costs like this much, and then you have to go through all sorts of lawyers, and then you're going to have to face all of these administrative things. That's an upfront cost, like you can't even start, versus a lot of the time tariffs are percentage taxes, like that, you know, you pay more based on how much success you're already having. Does that make sense?
First of all, no. But so you
Like,
agree
'cause
that
it's
if you're getting into manufacturing,
it's
and
a
let's say you're
tax.
trying to manufacture a good with steel and there's a giant tariff on steel, do you think you're going to get into, do you think you're even going to start the company to do that sort of manufacturing under this administration?
You may or may not. I mean, it would change the economic calculations for
Stop.
sure.
Stop. If you're getting into an,
There are still
if you're
people who
trying
can
to
get
start a
into one.
company where, let's say you're manufacturing a widget that requires 2 pieces of steel and wood, and there's a tariff on steel, you think you're going to start that company under the Trump administration?
It is still possible to start even under
Yeah, and
harder
it's still possible to
circumstances,
start
like
it's still possible to start companies under regulation. We're talking about the likelihood of starting that business.
I'm not even talking about the likelihood of starting it. I was talking about the difficulty of starting it.
The difficulty
'cause
of
a
starting
tariff,
the
again-
difficulty of starting a manufacturing company is going to increase with tariffs.
Slightly, but not as much as like an upfront regulation cost. So, like I
What's
said,
your- why
a
do you believe that?
Are you gonna? Because I get nervous trying to talk because I feel like you're gonna interrupt me when I'm trying to make my point. I'm sorry. It's stressing me out a little bit.
Listen, okay. I'm sorry I'm stressing you out, okay? But my problem is that right now you're engaging in very dishonest conversation with me, and you're trying to do it in a very kind voice, and it's making me really upset because this is not a kind conversation, right?
agree.
Like the idea that you can, in a very kind voice, downplay the idea that people were being tortured is really upsetting to me. That stresses me out a lot. But we're engaging in a political conversation, and it happens. Like this is what it is. I'm sorry that me interrupting you and cutting you off, whatever you mischaracterize my positions or whatever you make like a billion points, and I want to address the one at the beginning. I'm sorry if cutting you off makes you upset, but I'm telling you that this is the problem. This is the problem. Okay, so as we continue with this conversation, you could continue, but understand that whenever you are saying things that I think is like fundamentally rotting my country away, it's just because you say it in a kind voice, that doesn't mean that it's nice. Right?
I can see how that would be your perspective. Sometimes you cut me off right before I'm about to say something that would answer the question that you're trying to ask, but then you get kind of aggressive about it. So,
Okay.
so in terms of tariffs, it's a little bit different in that there are taxes that are often based on the amount that you're like buying to start your business. So for example, if you want to just start in manufacturing and then steel is a bit more expensive because of tariffs, you can start on a smaller scale and you can just, you know, obviously you're going to have to start smaller because you have a percentile tax, but that's very different from to even get into this business, you have to pay an upfront cost of like 10 plus years of training, and you have to take on a ton of debt, and like to even set up a facility that meets all the Democrat standards, it's going to like cost you like a fortune, and like it will take you half your life. You know, that's very different from, oh, there's a tax on a good. And like I said, I still don't agree with the tariffs. It's just different.
I don't understand why we play it down as there's a tax on a good, right? Like we know for a fact that these tariffs in Trump's first administration was causing like tons of people within the manufacturing sector to lose their job or have to cut down a lot of their operational costs Like if we're going into manufacturing, if I'm going into manufacturing and I see that this isn't a feasible business or sector for me to get into right now, if it was my passion, right, I'm just not going to get into that sector because of the tariffs.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible that you might make that decision.
Yeah, it's possible.
It's not that it's impossible to start the business, but you know,
It's not impossible to start a business with regulation either. That's not impossible.
yeah, but what I'm saying is that, you know, you're focusing very heavily on these tariff costs versus I'm more focused on the, I mean, if you even go into any type of industry, like whether it's finance, whether it's healthcare, whether it's, you know, housing, it's often so many layers of bureaucratic stuff that it's hard to even know where to start if you're just a regular person who wants to be an entrepreneur at this point. Like you have to look at federal, state, and local codes, and then whatever other board that the government contracts out that might write their own regulations that have quasi-governmental authority. And it's just even trying to navigate this at all as somebody who was like is really poor but has a lot of big dreams. It's like
I agree.
It gets really tiring.
I agree. We agreed to that at the beginning of the conversation, and the Democrats agree with that too. There's a push by the Democrats to be in favor of deregulation right now. That's the whole point of being like an abundance liberal or whatever.
In terms of abundance liberal, I agree that there are people within the Democrat Party who agree with that. They are not, just factually speaking, they are not the ones who currently have the power. A lot of them are younger. I look forward to seeing the differences that the younger people might make to the Democrat Party platform. But just factually speaking, I mean, the Biden administration added so much more regulatory burden versus Trump was just net deregulatory.
One of the policies, Harris was a more populist candidate than Joe Biden was, and one of Harris's policies that she was running on was cutting red tape in the housing market or in housing development. It was literally one of the things that she was running on.
Yeah, and I think that is one good policy. I mean, that I value not just deregulation in housing, but across different sectors too, though.
I understand. Like I look at the I understand. The problem is that you're looking at, so we get down to the same thing, is that if we're looking at the deregulation that is unique to Donald Trump, I'll grant that half of the unique, and I don't even know if I necessarily agree with this, but I'll grant for the sake of this conversation that half of the unique deregulation that Donald Trump wants to do is good. How does that half outweigh the suffering that is going on under his administration right now?
So in terms of the net suffering, this is what I was trying to get into earlier a little bit. I've noticed that it's very common, especially like with people who are firmly on the more left-wing side, to have this urge to empathize very strongly with intense suffering in the immediate sense versus things that are more spread out costs for a large population that might overall be more suffering, but because it's not concentrated on just a few individuals, it's harder to pin down exactly, because like the amount of like broken dreams or the amount of just difficulty going through life of a lot of these regulations, it's a little bit harder to quantify, and it's going to vary from person to person, industry to industry, but that's millions and millions of people. And obviously I disagree strongly with how they're treating the migrants in the facility. At the same time, a lot of them are illegal aliens who are consensually here illegally.
Stop. We've addressed this point. We have addressed this point. I don't stop bringing up that same point as if it hasn't been addressed. So the problem is that you keep using the most drastic language to characterize regulation, but then you don't use the consistent standard across the board. If your problem is like the entry cost for going into a business, you should have some sort of condemnation right now beyond, oh, I think that's bad or that's kind of bad, right? When we talk about the tariffs, right? When we talk about the condemnation for fucking ICE agents entering people's private property without a judicial warrant on the grounds of administrative warrants, it should probably be a larger condemnation than that's kind of bad, right? Like the idea, hold on. The idea that we look at the kind of repercussions that we're seeing from the tariffs that make people less likely to invest in U.S. markets, to see our fucking allies moving away from us. We saw literally, I think it was Japan and South Korea move closer to China on the world stage. Like, we saw a giant decrease in the amount of employment in the manufacturing sector in Donald Trump's first term because of these tariffs. The idea that we're not applying the same kind of rhetoric to that we were with the regulation just shows that you are ideologically captured, right? Like, it feels like what we're getting down to is that the only reason that you're putting like particular moral value on deregulation is because that's just your one sweetheart issue.
It's oftentimes so like there are a lot of things that I want to address, but then like when you try to jump into the thing, so I was talking about the decentralized suffering versus centralized, and then now I'm talking about
decentralized as well. When I brought up the unemployment in the manufacturing, that was a decentralized sense of, that's people losing their livelihoods. That's people not being able to operate productively within the United States economy. I'm talking about a decentralized suffering within when I'm bringing up the effects of the tariffs.
Will you let me finish?
Well, I'm telling you that what you're saying I didn't address, I directly addressed.
You sort of addressed it. I mean, in terms of the tariffs, you were very upset that my rhetoric is not equally as harsh on tariffs as it is on the regulations that basically make it harder to even, like, way harder than like the tariffs do to even start a business at all. So yeah, I mean, I disagree with the tariffs.
Is your problem starting business? Is your problem starting businesses, or is your problem like people living out their livelihoods? Because it seems like you're arbitrarily setting this bar of starting the business is the only thing that's bad. Preventing people from starting businesses is the only thing that's bad. But once those businesses start, the degree to which they operate is just like kind of fuck off, you know? Like if it's the case that we're seeing people losing their manufacturing jobs, how is that not like in the same way crushing people's livelihoods?
So I agree with you that the tariffs are bad. And I guess what I'm a little confused about is that just because I don't put the same weight on it as you, that means that I'm being super dishonest or whatever.
No, like, it's not the same weight.
It's just that I disagree with how, because you said like, no, because you were saying that your issue was my rhetoric, that I'm not like as against the tariffs as I am against the other regulations. And it's like, I have slightly different values than you.
It's not the weight that you're putting on the tariffs. The problem is that the tariffs are operating against your values. You said your value is not letting people have the economic freedom to operate within the market the way that they want to, right? So if that's your value, I don't understand why that value is not carried across consistently to another issue that is going against that value. That's what that's the point. It's not that you said that you don't like them.
Yeah, I'm being consistent. I said I disagree with this part of the Trump administration, but here is why I don't think it's as bad as some of the other regulations.
You said that the reason you don't like deregulation is because they're robbing people of their like mobility within the economy. It's like not allowing them to start their dream jobs or whatever. But you also acknowledge that tariffs were causing people to lose their dream jobs. So why is the rhetoric for tariffs that, I disagree with them, I think those were ill-advised, and the rhetoric in terms of deregulation is this is like a world-ending fucking, affecting 300 million people, preventing people from following their American dream, their lifestyles. Like, I'm asking you, like, if the issue is affecting, even if it's not the same amount of people, your issue should be carried across insofar as it affects people, right? Like, if you think that the tariffs are losing people's livelihoods, I would expect the condemnation to be a little bit more than I disagree with those. Those are ill-advised.
Yeah, because I would say that I am saying that they're ill-advised, so I am being consistent. I'm saying that I don't think they're as damaging as the net effect of all of the other regulatory burdens. Because if you look at tariffs, like I mentioned earlier, I think the first time that I joined, it is a little easier to escape the effects of them than it is when you have regulatory behemoths in most industries. You know, like if you have Democrats writing a whole bunch of regulations and they're, you know, different people in the administrative state, all the way down from like federal, state, local, different boards that they put in place, it's a lot easier to reduce the amount that the tariffs affect your life than it is to enter like I think there might be a few industries that maybe Democrats want a little less regulation. Is I think like maybe trans healthcare, they want a little less regulation than Republicans do.
You think it's just trans healthcare, really?
There's abortion. No, but like it's because if you it's about net effects of things. And I'm saying, yes, I disagree also with the tariffs. No, I don't think that they outweigh, you know, everything else in terms of the deregulatory platform. Like, especially
I'm not saying in isolation.
Right.
I'm not saying they do in isolation. The reason that I brought up the tariffs is because you brought up this idea that the only suffering that I can point to is something that's incredibly immediate and incredibly focused. The reason that I brought up the tariffs is because that invokes a sort of suffering that is not incredibly targeted, not incredibly focused. And it's something that will span across not only a long time because people are losing their fucking jobs in the manufacturing sector, and because it's disincentivizing people from going into manufacturing, but it's disincentivizing the United States from engaging in higher level manufacturing by putting fucking tariffs on lower level goods. But on top of that, it's disincentivizing like cooperation on the global scale. Right, like these are incredibly rippling downscale effects, and this is just the one example. Right, like the problem is that we have this one problem that you have is that it makes it harder. Regulation makes it harder for certain people to get into certain industries. I'm bringing up the fact that we sent people to a torture camp. We're disincentivizing cooperation on the global scale. We're making it incredibly hard for people to get into manufacturing. We're making it less likely for people to invest in fucking in the United States markets because of how fucking fragile they are because of Donald Trump putting on tariffs and then pulling them back and then putting them on again and then pulling them back. That's two issues, which, to be fair, I don't even think that, or at least tariffs, I don't think that in the grand scheme of things, even top 10 of the worst fucking things that Trump has done in this administration. I'm not understanding your calculus here on how you're measuring, because it seems like you also conceded that the amount of suffering that you can actually attribute to these deregulations is very, very unquantifiable. So I'm asking you, like, what's the calculation you're engaging in that these tariffs or that these regulations are making it more difficult or making it or are causing more suffering even in the long term than Donald Trump is right now?
I mean, I don't really know how you're making the calculation either of like that you think that the suffering of those things is more important than the suffering imposed by all the regulations, because it's also not just like making it harder to start businesses, but for example, in healthcare, a lot of people die because of how expensive healthcare is because of regulations. I mean, there are a lot of things that are like a little bit harder because you don't see the immediate effects of, like, it's not exactly the same as sending mostly illegal immigrants, I believe, to concentration camp, which obviously is horrible.
75%, but okay.
75%
Let's look at
I think you said.
Let's look at healthcare. Like, who do you think, which party in general wants to make it less expensive to be insured?
To be insured, I think Republicans, for sure. They want it to be less expensive. They really fought Obamacare that like raised the cost of premiums massively because they forced you to pay for plans that you often don't need. So like they forced you to pay for plans that, like, I mean, I think that they overturned the fact that there was originally like a fine if you didn't or something. I think California still has one, but yeah, I mean, like I think for sure Republicans are way better for healthcare affordability.
Can I talk about this?
Sure.
I love Obamacare.
Yeah, if Sarah wants, yeah, go for it.
Yeah, hang on. Give me a second, okay? You can continue.
Yeah,
So,
we could look. Did the ACA raise?
Yeah, okay. So it didn't like raise the cost of premiums the way you're saying it did. What it just So initially, it did make people have to pay if they didn't have insurance, to try and get them to hop on insurance, right? Which is probably a good thing. We want more people to be insured, yeah. But I probably agree with removing that. But it did also lower the cost of your deductible, which is good. Most people pay less in insurance now than they did previously, which is good, yeah. We want people to pay less for their insurance.
No, I'm not sure what analysis you're looking at, because I have seen the complete opposite because I think that the way that sometimes people might come to that conclusion, if they have like a strong left-wing bias, is it did make it, I think, slightly cheaper to get the most expensive healthcare policies, but it also forced you to pay a lot more because you couldn't really get the lower end ones. So like when people say, oh, Obamacare covered previously uncovered conditions or something like that, I saw that in the chat, it means that you're forced to pay that higher amount because
are they paying that higher amount, or is it the ACA that's paying that higher amount?
What do you mean by the ACA that's paying that higher amount? Because the Affordable Care Act is about their like regulations and stuff.
It would be the ACA that would be paying that amount. The insurance company raising their prices has nothing to do with how much you're actually paying.
I mean, by ACA covering it, what do you mean? Because like the ACA, I'm pretty sure, is the act of like introducing all these regulations. They might have also put in some parts of the bill that like cover, I don't know if it also increased Medicaid or something, but because I don't really know what you're referring to with that.
Yeah, okay. So I want you to go ahead and tell me what you think Obamacare did, because I don't think you understand what Obamacare did.
So Obamacare basically mandated that insurance policies have to cover a lot more conditions than they previously did. There were also a lot of other things that it mandated, but that was just the main thing that is being complained about.
Yeah. So it made it to where you had to insurance companies had to still insure you even if you have pre-existing conditions. Yeah. Right.
I believe that was one of the regulations that increased.
That was the main thing. That was the main thing with Obamacare.
It wasn't the. I don't know.
It also gives you financial assistance, right? It also gives you a financial assistance for.
So since taking effect, the Affordable Care Act has more than doubled premiums in the individual market. So this is about.
Are the people paying for those premiums, or is it the government that's paying for those premiums?
I mean, either way, I oppose large amounts of taxes to
but
pay for the
it did make insurance
industry,
cheaper for Americans. It did make insurance cheaper for Americans. Yeah.
I don't think so. No, I mean,
especially it didn't, even though they're paying less than their insurance. Even though they're paying less than their insurance.
They're not.
They
are. What is your?
They are. The government is the one paying for their insurance, and then
the government is taxpayer money. That means you're forced to pay for it. Like, do you think that the government is just some like blob? Like, even if they fund it by printing money instead of directly taxing, that's an indirect tax.
So, but it is the case that out of your pockets, you're paying less for insurance, right?
I mean, taxes are also out of my pocket.
Just answer the question. It's a yes or no question. Out of your pockets, you're paying less for insurance, yeah?
No.
No, you're not. Okay, it's just false. You're just wrong.
No, you're just wrong. Like a lot more has to be spent on healthcare because of Obama.
Did the ACA raise taxes or something?
That is, I mean, obviously you have to pay for it either directly via taxes.
Did the ACA raise taxes?
Do you think that you can increase?
It's a yes or no question. Answer the question.
I don't know if they.
You don't know if the ACA raised taxes.
Are you gonna let me finish? Are you gonna let me finish?
Did the ACA raise taxes? It's a yes or no question.
Usually the tax bill is a separate bill that you use to raise money for.
But the ACA didn't raise taxes.
No, like, because that's how.
No, it didn't. It's not a part of the bill, right?
That's not how the
didn't make people pay more in taxes, so they're not paying more for their insurance because their taxes didn't increase.
Dude, yes, they did. The Obama administration bumped up taxes in order to pay for it. Usually, they just fund it in a separate bill.
Where is that in the bill? Where is that at?
Are you gonna let me say anything?
Well, you're just like lying. You're just lying up
No,
here.
I'm not. I'm not lying because it's a separate bill. That's not how things are funded. In fact, if anything,
Sure. I
it's
mean, I guess
usually.
where in Obama's
Are you
like,
gonna?
I don't know much about Obama's tax policy. I probably don't want to
I'm
talk
not.
about it.
I'm not gonna engage with you if you keep interrupting me because you won't even let me answer your questions.
Sure. Okay.
Okay. So in terms of how the government funds things, it's usually the right wing, if anything, that wants like a balanced budget amendment. I'm not saying that either party is really pushing for that, or like that in every bill that you need to fund it within the bill, but typically you raise the money for the policies via separate mechanisms. So like if you increase government spending, that does come from somewhere. Like if you're
okay.
just
I don't
imagining
know.
that this money is coming from thin air, I mean that's just, you don't really know how that works.
Yeah. Okay. If a balanced budget is like what you want, then maybe Republicans aren't for you.
I mean it's something that I would like.
I don't want to talk about the tax policy. You said the ACA was ineffective, even though it made healthcare cheaper for Americans.
No, it did not.
That's the
It
point
did
of the
not.
ACA, yeah?
It raised the cost of healthcare. Like the
Not for
Americans have to pay
Americans.
massive. Yes, it
No,
did.
it didn't.
Okay, let me look.
No, the government is
back.
subsidizing that extra cost.
Do you understand how the government gets funded and how it subsidizes things? It's from
A lot of the time it's through taxes.
taxpayers.
But I want you to show me where, like, the ACA increased
And
taxes on people. 'Cause
also,
that's
it
just,
can
I mean,
defund it
I'm pretty
in
sure
other
Obama's tax policy had already passed by the time the ACA had passed.
ways,
So nobody's taxes are being raised.
indirect ways that tax people still. But like, let me find actually the precise.
Wait, so but the tax policy isn't changing, is it? Considering that the Obama's taxes had already passed before the ACA was passed.
He needed to increase taxes to fund for some of his proposals.
Yeah, but where
in
did
terms
we
of
see this
this,
tax
let me
increase?
look
certainly
at it.
wasn't.
Like I'm trying
Look,
to.
you're making a claim. I want to see where this tax increase came after the ACA. Considering
I
literally
didn't say it
that
came,
same
like,
election, he got
after I
voted
said
out
it was
of
a
office.
separate bill.
Okay, so I mean, I guess show me the bill where taxes were raised on Americans after the ACA had passed.
So the taxpayer definitely isn't covering it for everyone. They are often
Can you answer the
covering
question
it for
though?
the
Like,
poorest
show me the bill.
Americans.
Show me the bill where.
So it's the tax. Let's see, like how, because I think they usually approve each like the tax thing each year. Let me see. Because if you think it's like each bill has in there how they're going to tax to pay for it, that's just definitely, that's just not how it
That's not what I'm
works.
saying. Obviously, that's not what I'm saying. But you're saying that the ACA increased taxes, but there's just
No, I didn't.
there's just no
That's
evidence
not what I
that the
said.
ACA. You did. You literally did say that. You said it increased people's tax burden.
It increased people's tax burden indirectly, but it's not like what it literally says
Do
inside
you
the
mean
bill.
the funds were
It's that
reallocated
you're
towards healthcare? Is that
increasing.
what you mean? That's true. The funds were in fact
No.
reallocated towards healthcare because the ACA.
How do you
is
think that
healthcare.
government spending gets funded?
A lot of times it's approved through Congress.
Okay, so the
Through
ACA
Congress?
raised taxpayer costs by hundreds of billions annually through subsidies and Medicaid. For individuals, it dramatically increased gross premiums and deductibles. So it increased the premiums and deductibles, and it raised taxpayer costs. So
Where
it
did we
increased the cost on
see?
both the taxpayer and on the, and then yeah, maybe it didn't say exactly in the bill how the taxpayer was going to fund it, but that's just not how government spending.
You're just saying that the funds were reallocated. That's what you're telling me. That's what I'm hearing.
No, that's not what I said.
That's almost exactly what you said. But okay. I think it's like ridiculous to think that this thing that made insurance cheaper for Americans
It did not
is
make
a
it
bad
cheaper.
thing.
It dramatically
I don't
increased
know. I don't get
premiums
it.
and deductibles.
But it didn't increase how much Americans are paying. It decreased how much Americans are paying.
It radically increased how much Americans are paying. I don't know where you're getting your information from.
Just because the deductible increased doesn't mean that people were paying more. Were paying more for their insurance.
No,
their insurance is already getting subsidized by the government.
So both taxpayers and individual costs went up with the ACA.
No, that's false.
Yes,
Because
yes,
their
it's
interest is being
true.
subsidized. What are you talking about?
Okay, let's talk about each thing. So do you understand that premiums went up for individuals from Obamacare?
I would say premium costs did go up. I wouldn't say that individuals are paying more on their premiums.
It just, that's just factually not right. In the individual market, it dramatically increased premiums and deductibles.
So are you saying that the subsidies in Obamacare weren't paid out to Americans? Is that what you're saying? Because they certainly were.
That's not what I'm saying.
Maybe your problem is that there's like certain people can't get Obamacare. Is that a problem?
What do you mean by
Because I agree we should
Obamacare?
expand it. We should expand Obamacare to everyone.
What do you mean by people can't get Obamacare?
Like
Like
people
a
who
lot
make
of
a certain
it's
amount
a
of money,
huge.
or like some people.
So
who
are
don't
you
have
talking about
families can't
Medicaid?
get
Because I think
Obamacare.
you're confused
No,
about what the
it's the
ACA
same with
does.
Obamacare too.
Because Obamacare is like a series of regulations, and it has other things in it too. It's a massive bill.
No, okay, yeah, it's a series of regulations, but it's also a series of subsidies to make insurance cheaper.
Yeah, I mean, it offset the cost on some individuals indirectly via taxpayer funding, but it overall increased both the cost on taxpayers and on individuals.
That's false. That's just not true.
You're just wrong. You can research this if you want. It dramatically increased premiums.
For who? For who?
For on average, and also like especially for the
On
lowest end,
average,
because
really? I'd like to see the evidence
yes,
for that. I'd like to see the
yes,
evidence that people
it
are paying
says
more on their premiums
She
now
cooking you on the low, Antoine. I'm pretty sure
than
that's
they
just
were
super true.
before the ACA.
I'm pretty sure it's super
It's
true. The
not
premiums
true.
did rise on average. I'm pretty sure that is true.
So I'm
But
sorry.
they're being
it's
subsidized. They're being subsidized.
for some people. For some people, they are. There were
For
some
most
Medicaid
people,
increases.
for most people, they are.
Sorry, my roommates just got home. I don't know if you hear it in the background, but
We can.
I'm
basically.
sorry. It did increase it both on average, but even also the more important thing to me is even it increased the lowest that you can pay. So, like for example, you can't just get catastrophic insurance anymore, like on the private market in the way that you could before. Like they try to like say like basically if you control for like, oh, if you had to buy things that covered all of this before, yeah, that cost may or may not have gone down relative to inflation, but you didn't used to have to buy policies that had all of those things in them.
Okay. So it sounds like you're rejecting that these subsidies helped Americans. That's just not
Yes,
the case.
I reject that overall. I think it helped some people.
Even though like about 40 million Americans now have a cheaper insurance, and even more Americans are now covered by Medicare and Medicaid, right? We're increasing the amount of people that are on healthcare. That's what we want, right? And we're also making it cheaper for people.
We're not making it cheaper for people. We're making it cheaper for some people. Yeah, there was a Medicaid
For most
expansion.
people, most people.
No,
most people
not most people.
Okay, so I mean, what? Okay. I want you to prove that like most people. I want you to prove that most people had their insurance be increased because of Obamacare.
Most people, yeah, the average premium like doubled.
That has nothing to do with how much they're paying. Their premiums can increase, and the government can subsidize their premiums.
But the
Which is what
government is only
Obamacare did.
subsidizing it for some people. So that's what I'm saying. Of like it did
They were
advantage some people.
subsidizing it for most people. It depends on your wage bracket or how much money you make.
I mean,
And most people make within the amount that the ACA is offering.
The ACA, as in, let me see. So you're saying, is it that you're saying that the Medicaid expansion now covers the majority of Americans? Is that what you're saying?
No. You're forgetting the subsidies. You're forgetting the subsidies that I'm talking about.
So the subsidies, and by subsidies, are you talking about like handouts to the insurance industry?
You can call it that, I guess. You can call it that.
So taxpayers have to fund handouts to the insurance industry, and you're
but you have to give me any evidence that the ACA itself increased taxes.
Well, basically, like in pretty much any analysis that you can find, yes, it raised taxpayer costs In terms of
I'd like you to give me
Please.
the analysis, please.
by
By the way, whenever either of
Basically,
you
you
two
have-
are
you
ready
have
to
to
tap
raise
out, I'm
taxes
ready to go to
separately.
bed. Okay, so whenever you guys are ready to tap out, I'm
Well,
ready
look,
to tap
Rinald,
out. I
if you
just
want
want
to
to let
end
you
your
guys
life,
know that.
don't force
No,
this
I'll
You
let
conversation.
you
have to
guys
raise the
litigate it.
taxes
I'll let you guys
separately.
litigate.
Like if you pass a bill that requires a lot of spending, you have to get that money somehow. It doesn't matter if it doesn't
through the
say
taxes that we already
inside of
have.
that same bill. No, Obama, like the tax burden increased under Obama, and it was partly to fund the ACA.
That was like way earlier on in his presidency, though. That was like at the start of his presidency, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah,
I don't know
he had
why
to-
the fuck
he had
you're
to get the
letting
tax
people
funding.
up. Hayden, it does not need to be done. I don't know why the fuck you did that, buddy. I'm trying to go to bed.
So I don't support something that increases the burdens on taxpayers, increases
You haven't
government
proved
spending,
that, Sarah. You have not proved that to me.
Yes, it increased the burden on taxpayers. I don't know how.
I'd like to see your evidence for that.
I feel like I'm just talking to someone in a different reality. It just, if you increase government spending,
Can you just give me the evidence that it increased the amount of money that Americans are paying?
so it increases the cost, and then you have to fund that either immediately or later via either taxes or printing money. Like,
Yeah, but
where
there's
do you
just,
think
just no
government
evidence.
spending
There's
comes from?
no evidence that the ACA increased taxes.
Yes, there is. I mean,
In fact, the year
it-
after the ACA passed,
indirectly
people had their
by
taxes
increasing-
lowered with the TCJA, and ACA funds were still being sent out.
So overall, if you have government spending, yes, sometimes it's not immediately funded. We have a lot of deficit spending, but overall, the taxpayer increase does go up long term. I mean, sometimes there are like budget cuts in the short term, but you overall increase the tax burden long term.
Everybody's
if you have a
getting
lot of
hit.
government
Holy
spending.
moly.
Yeah, you guys
Sarah-
have 10 minutes. Go crazy.
Here,
Okay.
let me
Is
hear
Antoine getting
Sarah.
ragdolled on the econ
Sarah,
right
can
now?
can I ask you a really quick question?
Fuck did you just say to me, cringy? Yeah,
Is
go
Antoine
ahead,
getting
Val. Go ahead.
ragdolled in
Go ahead,
econ?
Val. Go ahead, Val.
Okay, so you're talking about it being a tax burden increase. Did you see which Americans that was a tax burden increase for? Because you're correct, it did increase taxes, but did you see who it affected?
I believe that it is probably high income earners based on the way Democrats tax.
Yes, because
Right.
that would make the most sense to tax them. I'm just to be clear, I'm moderate. I'm not like super left leaning. But it only affected people that had a income of either 200,000 for individual or 250,000 for married and above. And it was a 0.9% payroll in tax. And then the 3.8% was investment income only. So like this whole like tax burden suffering thing, it's not a valid point.
I mean, raising taxes, it does take away from their wealth, which I just, on principle, disagree with raising
look,
taxes even on the wealthy.
I earn I'm not gonna go into it, but I earn a very good amount, right?
Mhm.
If I lose an extra couple grand a year, it doesn't affect me.
Okay, but the high income earners, these are the people
lot
that
of the-
contribute the most.
So
to society.
we were kind of talking about two things. One was like the set of subsidies and the Medicaid expansion, and then the other was the cost for individuals. So in terms of the government redistribution, while I overall oppose most forms of that, I'm less against it than I am against the regulatory burden where, because a lot of people are still not covered by Medicaid expansion and everything, and I definitely don't want, full, like I personally disagree with full single payer. I do think it actually in some ways would be better than what we have now, but there's a huge gap in coverage. So there are a lot of people whose premiums went up who are now have to pay more than they did in the past out of even just their own individual pockets, even if you don't look at the tax burden.
Is this?
I mean,
is this
the fact that you think that raising taxes on principle is bad, I think that's just like fucking ridiculous. Like we don't live in a world where things just like pay for themselves. Like we can't live in this like fantasy where the government doesn't raise taxes in order to like fund for social programs. It's like not a world we live in. So I said
I
violates
with
our
raising.
rights and calls for unaliving people. Guys, let's have a conversation about Obamacare.
okay, what is
So
Don't worry, Scratch. We litigated that for like a fucking hour. Don't worry, buddy.
in terms of
It's actually lower
raising
than-
taxes, no, I don't believe. I think that a completely ANCAP world is not possible. but by raising taxes, I mean increasing the amount that we're already taxing people. I think we already have too high of taxes, and we should cut a lot of programs.
Yeah,
That's
where'd you find? Yeah, where'd you
have-
make that determination off of what, buddy?
The taxes on certain brackets, I can agree with you, because the taxes on lower earners and middle class earners, 100%, they
Yes,
should
I
get
agree.
tax reliefs. Yeah, I super
Actually,
agree.
wait, how'd you come to that determination? I'm just curious, Sarah.
I just, on principle, disagree with most government services, and I don't agree with the government taking money from individuals.
Well,
or
your
from
principle's
business.
ridiculous and stupid. If I were you, I'd like rethink
Based?
that real
Good
quick.
point, Brian.
But
maybe
you're-
like I live in
you're
reality.
supporting-
I
Why is the
have to like
government
eat and
taking
breathe in
money
order to
from
Yeah.
me
live.
to
Interrupt
That's kind of
me.
like a
feed
principle I
starving
gotta rethink.
children?
Sarah, I just have a
I should
question.
be able to buy my Xbox 360 so I can play Fallout 76, and those children can starve. As far as I care, bro.
How do you like prioritize government spending? Like, what categories do you think is essential? Like, do you think that the rate at which we're like spending on the military is right? Do you think that it should be decreased? Do you think maybe there's other areas that we can cut other than healthcare?
We spend more on health than military.
I do agree
Just asking
with
you a question.
decreasing military spending cautiously. I agree with that.
Cautiously?
Well, you were talking about the homeless industrial complex, so I just want to know if you understand that there's a military industrial complex, which is, I think, more significant.
Yeah.
Guys.
Wait, Dot,
like
Dot,
I said,
Dot,
I agree
Dot,
with
you don't
cutting
understand the logic, okay? Instead of helping people who are in need, we need to go and kill innocent and people.
Rue, I'm so sorry. I'm so
okay?
sorry I missed
That's
that.
the priority.
Okay,
Thank
can we
you,
stop
Brad.
memeing? Can we please stop memeing? Okay, there's two people who actually want to have a talk about the ACA. I understand that we're memeing.
Fine,
Trump's bad. We
guys.
all agree. We all agree Trump's bad. We all agree. I understand. I
Except for
understand. Can
Sarah.
we talk about the topic,
Yeah.
please?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so like the whole
Go
tax the rich thing, the rich are kind of the ones carrying
Not that
our
topic. We're
society.
talking about the litigate the ACA first. Okay, we don't need to talk about progressive income taxes right now. Just litigate the ACA. Okay, and then I'm going to bed. Okay. I love you guys. Litigate the ACA first.
I'm just not really seeing a huge negative with Obamacare. I'm just really not seeing the huge negative. It covered a lot more people than it did previously. It gave people a lot more options.
The
The
by
tax-
covering, do you
yeah.
mean like when they were forcing people to pay, or are
No,
you
like-
talking about the amount of uninsured people went down? Like which
yeah, that
part
one
are you
mainly.
talking about?
That one mainly because pre-existing conditions, that was like a huge thing, and Obamacare like greatly helped with that, which is big. I mean, if I don't know, just me personally, like even if I was in a position where it's like, oh hey, you know what, money's really tight. Let's say something did increase. Let's say my premium did go up by like $50 or whatever, like a month or whatever. I mean, that's just kind of the cost of saving lives, right? Because like being able to cover more people is saving lives.
I think pre-existing conditions and disabilities are one of the few areas where I would say I disagree with the libertarian policy stance. I think that they should have funded it a different way than they did, but I do think that pre-existing conditions and like different disabilities Americans have, I think that should be covered by the government because that's not really something you asked for.
Yeah, what is the downside of Obamacare and how it was funded as far as that?
So the main downside was the regulatory burden, like I said. So there's a huge gap in coverage now where a lot of people's premiums went up, but then they're not eligible for the Medicaid expansion. And then even then, I still just don't really agree with single payer healthcare. But I do think in some ways single payer would be better than Obamacare because right now you have a lot of like lower middle class people who have to pay a lot. And I think that their net costs went up even just on an individual basis.
Do you I remember, so you are obviously supporting Trump with this. What do you feel like he is doing to mediate, like to fix this situation, to make it better?
I think that they want to cut or change Obamacare. I don't know how successful they've been. I know they haven't been fully
They want to repeal Obamacare.
Yes,
They want to repeal it without a great replacement.
Yeah, without any replacement.
He hasn't proposed a good replacement yet.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing that I don't love about the Trump administration is that he like, 10 years in, he's like, I have concepts of a plan. That wasn't
it's 10
wonderful.
years. It's a very long
Yeah, I
time.
mean, but that's like really bad. Like that's gonna throw millions of Americans off of their health care.
Yeah, we just had that whole thing not too long ago, and that was just not a good look. I just feel like if he was actually going to produce results with that, it would have happened in 10 years.
Yeah, I mean, I would support repealing Obamacare even with all the like subsidy handouts to the insurance industries and all the the Medicaid stuff. I think, I'm kind of I have complicated opinions about some like Medicaid things and everything, but I'm mainly talking about the insurance regulations and how much more difficult it made it both to become an insurer and also to get to pay for your own insurance.
How did
Especially
it make it
people
become
still
more
have
difficult to become an insurer?
Oh, because it raises a lot of the upfront costs that you would have to if you wanted to become an insurer and you had to abide by all the ACA rules. It's just let me see.
Doesn't the ACA
let me find the
subsidize
specific
that?
thing stipulations.
The ACA does have subsidies
Because you have to cover a
for-
lot more conditions now.
Were you trying to become an insurer, or why are you concerned with
Not
insurers?
completely.
Reduced competition leads to higher prices.
Oh yeah, I mean, I've been interested in becoming an insurer potentially, but I know that there are a ton of rules and regulations. It's not just the ACA on that. But in terms of subsidies, I mean, it's handouts to existing players in the insurance industry. I don't know if there's anything for startups in there, but I could try to take a look.
I get a little bit confused with this too, because we're talking so much about saving money, lowering costs, but the person that you're supporting here is doing everything he seems like he can do to increase costs and waste money.
Yeah,
Wait,
and you said
how
that you're in support of making
How so?
insurance cheaper for
He just-
Americans, but Obama
Sorry.
is actively trying to increase it. I mean, sorry, but Trump is actively trying to increase it by repealing the ACA. Yeah.
I mean, we're throwing money all over.
Yeah,
the
he's trying to
place
repeal the
right
ACA,
now.
which was what made it more expensive.
No, that's not okay. Whatever.
The ACA just objectively it made premiums more expensive, and then some of it got put onto the taxpayer, and then some of it got put onto individuals in the economy.
He can't repeal Obamacare without an effective way to replace it, though.
Repeal and replace.
What do you mean by?
You
why-
can't remove something and then have
you
no
need to
plan of actually
replace
replacing it.
something that was
Like something beneficial, right? I mean, we just asked for $200 billion to go bomb Iran for fun. And that's his point.
Yeah.
But
Yes,
then
you
but
can. I
then
mean,
we
that's
can't, but then we
actually
can't throw
topical.
money towards
That's
Medicare.
actually
Oof. Gotta get him to fill to justify the unalignment bill.
in terms of Medicare.
We're spending.
I just gotta hear this.
I
It's an
disagree
axiom,
with bombing
actually.
Iran.
It's self-evident.
I even posted about it in the center right server I'm in and everything, a quite detailed explanation of why I disagree with his actions with Iran. So
Oh, I mean,
just
yeah,
so
it
that
doesn't
it's
take
clear.
it doesn't take too much to,
kinda
to figure out why to disagree with that. But then, I mean, even
So in terms
even
of, but
yeah.
what you said earlier about you can't repeal something without replacing it, that is a huge philosophical disagreement. So I wanted to touch on that. I, as somebody who leans more libertarian, I disagree with having a ton of laws on the books in general. So I would rather deregulate and then not replace it by just another monster.
It's
just get rid of it. It doesn't need to be replaced. It didn't need to exist.
It's not
Oh,
about
kind of like a wait. So you agree that Doge is a dumb idea then?
Well, I mean, it overall was trying to save the government money, so no.
But we already had
disagree
the GAO, and we already had the OIG, and we
Doge
already had
was-
the.
They were
OMB.
still finding a lot of stuff that they wanted to cut. I think that Elon got upset because I think they saved. I think that he said that he cut it by what was it, $100 billion? I don't know.
no.
Well, you're saying
they-
why add more? You're saying why add more things?
The
Why add more
amount-
things when we already have these things to have it, right?
Doge-
And we already
Doge-
had
If
three. We already had
something
three separate.
cuts
We already
costs,
had the
then
government.
bring that.
We already had 3 different agencies literally responsible, right, for getting
That
rid
doesn't
of
mean that
government
they were
waste.
I love
actually
you guys.
effective.
I love you guys.
All right.
Good night, Rick.
Follow
Those
each
are so
other.
effective.
Follow each other. Go talk to each other separately. I'm fucking tired. It's
Yeah,
2
I
a.m.
love it as
here.
well.
I
We
can't
appreciate
believe
the
I'm
love,
this
man.
person.
Love you.
Appreciate
Sleep
you.
well.
Love you.
I love you, Rinnyald.
Love you guys.
Do, 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 do.